Together with the armoured half-tracks, we have now conducted 2 attacks. The armoured attack on December 3rd was my first since October 1941, when we were in the middle sector near Vyazma. My leadership brought success, which makes me very happy. On the evening after that first attack, we moved into a defensive position, which we held together with Oberleutnant Schaefer of the SPW Battalion. We were fortunate as the night remained quiet, and later we found a house with a room all to myself. The corners of the room, with its dark wooden floors and walls, were decorated with paintings of the saints, and wooden crucifixes stood on the table and the shelves. The icons were all very old and larger than those we had encountered in northern and central Russia. All kinds of saints are displayed on these wooden boards, which have been covered with plaster, gilded with gold foil, and then painted. The gold foil is mainly used to depict the large, glistening halos. They are mostly covered with old Russian lettering in some kind of symbolic writing, similar to the IHS and the earlier 9 monogram of the ancient Greek Christians. Peter Schultz should be returning soon. He is with the Oberst at the moment, from whom he will receive his EK1. I recommended him for that award a few days ago. Ranzinger received his immediately after the fighting. I was able to congratulate him on the same evening at Zollenkopf's command post. I had to wait 3 months for mine after having been recommended for it. Now then, Schultz has been here. I did indeed manage to surprise him. He came in and then put a bottle of champagne on the table. He knew that I had put him in for the EK1 and that I already knew all about it. Lieutenant Lindner from the company baggage train joined us, and we then emptied the bottle together. Well, as the leader of the baggage train, he can't earn any laurels. He will have to make do with that Romanian award the Oberst put him in for. It's supposed to be a very colourful one. Another occurrence. Voss is an Unteroffizier again. Friedrich Wilhelm Voss, once the driver of Hauptmann Hiller, had been demoted and sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment by the court-martial of our division. When we advanced through Lithuania, being completely intoxicated, he checked the contents of the fuel tank of his motorbike with the help of a burning match. He endangered the life of another Unteroffizier who had been riding on his bike, and the punishment had been quite severe. Now, after proving himself at the front, I wrote an appeal to the court in which I asked to reinstate his rank and waive the outstanding punishment, and it worked. He is wearing his braid again, and that makes me very happy indeed because I like Voss. He was my driver last year when I acted as a courier for the IB, who, at that time, and due to the terrible road conditions, had been the most important man of the division. After he had been demoted, Voss became the driver of my Kubelwagen. Yes, never join a drinking competition with Lithuanians, and never try to illuminate the inside of your motorbike's fuel tank with a burning match when it's dark outside. For the resulting fireworks, he got much more than the 3 days of arrest he had hoped for. But now he is an Unteroffizier again, and yesterday he penned a joyful letter to his young wife. Probably the first time I have seen him write a lengthy letter like this. Up until now, we have been subordinated to Oberst Zollenkopf, whom we got to know during the 1941 campaign. He is as cool as a cucumber and has often commanded battle groups on the Leningrad front and in the central sector. He has never received the Knight's Cross, however, only the German Cross in gold. They have treated him a bit shabbily in that respect, but that can happen to anyone out here. I now have to report another little adventure that I experienced when we attempted to recover Rulisinski's body. The exploded tank was standing alongside a ravine near the road leading from Kotelnikovo to Poklebin, 2 kilometers north of that road, to be precise. While we were approaching this location, I spotted movement on the slope. There were horses there, saddled and with swords hanging from their sides. As we got closer, I jumped off Klusen's half-track and walked towards the horses to find out what was happening. In a crouch, I got closer until I was about 50 meters away, and only then did I realize that the whole area was full of dark-skinned, slant-eyed Cossacks. At first glance, I counted about 20 of them. I didn't see them at first because they had tethered their horses and hunkered down at the stream on the opposite bank. I was now closer to them than to my men in the half-track behind me. I turned around, shouted, "Everyone get out and arm yourselves!" and threw myself into cover in a shallow depression in the ground. I then crawled closer towards the Russians and shouted at them to drop their weapons and raise their hands. Fiddlesticks! They were swinging themselves into their saddles and taking their rifles off their shoulders. That was not good. Now I counted over 30 of them, all armed and on horseback. We were only 5 men in an old half-track tractor, not ideal odds. I had made my pistol ready but didn't open fire as I didn't want to annoy these Cossacks more than they already were. I still wanted them to surrender. Not taking any risks, I ordered everyone to get back into the half-track, and we drove back towards the road. In the meantime, the Cossack patrol had ridden off towards the northeast at breakneck speed. 5 against 30, that would have been taking it a bit too far. And the Russians could decide to turn around. As such, we were glad when we saw the tank of Unteroffizier Picard on the road, waiting to be towed to the repair shop. It had suffered a barrel burst, but the machine guns were still working, and with those, we could have slaughtered the Russians. The tank had broken down in the water of the ford and could not be restarted. There was no way we could chase the Russians, whom we could see riding away across the ridgeline in the distance. It was a very picturesque scene, and a few minutes later, they had disappeared from sight. We then drove to the destroyed tank and recovered our dead comrade, whom we then buried in the heroes' cemetery in Kotelnikovo, next to the grave of Hauptmann Hagemeister. Today we are to fall back on Semichnaya. It is now 10 a.m., and at 11:30 a.m. we are to move out, even though we had just gotten comfortable here after 2 nights. Our future quarters will be in a tiny village, and we are supposed to move into the school building which also houses the hospital. So we are back on the road, and we arrive in the dark again. And that is where the real trouble starts. The small tribulations of a company leader. Today we learned the Russians have given up Budarka in the northeast, and up at the Don they have cleared Wesely and Safronov. I wonder what Timoshenko is planning. I can't make head or tail of it. The comrades at the Volga are deep in trouble. There will be no Christmas leave for them, that much is sure. I guess there won't be any for us either, but at least we are not surrounded and reliant on being supplied from the air. Now I have 15 vehicles in my company. 4 of them are currently in the repair shop, and the other 11 are fully operational. These consist of 3 7.5 centimeters armed vehicles and 8 armed with the long 5 centimeters gun. Not ideal, but now we must wage war with these machines. We did get by with less in previous years. Yesterday I took 10 men to Poklebin, where we deinstalled the gun of Hauptmann Hagemeister's tank with the intention of installing it in Picard's tank. We captured 2 cows along the way, which have been slaughtered by now. There is chaos in Poklebin. Our company alone has fired 500 shells and 21,350 machine gun rounds to keep the artillery in check. That is quite a lot. The Russians had most excellent interchangeable positions up there, and as soon as we had identified a target by its muzzle flash, the Russians limbered up and, using the deep ravine, moved it to a different location. The Russian AT gun crews, whom we could see quite clearly through our binoculars, aimed their guns and fired before jumping into foxholes that had been dug all around. They were always quick enough to evade our retaliatory fire. All the Russian guns were excellently camouflaged, and their small anti-tank guns in particular were impossible for us to take out. However, they made the error of opening fire on us too early. If they had waited until we had come within 500 or so meters of them, then they could have caught us in the flank. But being lucky has always been the most important thing in war. If one is not lucky, that will be the end. During the attack, Peter Schultz got stuck in a rain-filled ditch. Bartneck's tank suffered an engine breakdown, and Gefreiter Diekutsch, who had walked barefoot in France and had bent his watering can, suffered a broken arm after holding it too close to the gun deflector. That was, thank God, our only casualty that day. Soon we'll be moving out to Kotelnikovo again. The company is already assembled. Peter Schultz and I are still sitting in our room while I am writing these lines into my diary. Thanks to the 2 cows we found in Poklebin, we had fried liver last night. Having something as tasty as this after such a long time is a real treat. Even though the flames of the big oven leaped into the pan and the liver was more black than brown in places, it tasted really good. Back in Kotelnikovo, in our old quarters near the road. When we were rolling into Kotelnikovo, some Russian bombers made an appearance and dropped their bombs on us. The flak started firing like mad, but even though one of the 7 Russian machines started trailing smoke, they all managed to get away. Kamerad, kennst du Nackerbrot? At the moment, this is how the comrades greet one another. This slogan is printed on the crisp bread packages which form part of our rations here. In some of the platoons, the men have memorized the entire advertising text on the package and then, for fun, composed a tune to go with it. Now, whenever comrades meet one another, or whenever a supply column or some other vehicle is pulling into the village, they are greeted with terrace songs and chants about crisp bread. All the best funerals have humorous elements. Now it is 2:30 p.m. and the sun is already setting. My tank crew is getting a new Gunner Unteroffizier Picard. He has just arrived with all his stuff. I was fed up with Bachmann. He likes to bark, but doesn't know how to bite, and worst of all, he never hits anything. In combat, I don't have time to correct and adjust the shots myself. I need a gunner who knows how to do the job on his own. Now Picard is standing here, lamenting the fact that his own tank had just been repaired when he was detached to join my crew. I can't help it now. He will soon have his own tank again. There will be plenty of vacancies should it kick off tomorrow. I am waiting for the call from the Abteilung ordering me to join the briefing for tomorrow's attack. Are we really attacking towards Stalingrad? That would be a hard job indeed. I can't stop thinking about our first 2 attacks here and how lucky we were. The muzzle flashes through the haze on the slope ahead, 4, 6, 8, sometimes all at once. Mortar shell impacts emit dark black clouds of smoke. Having been fired over open sights, the Russian shells howl past at more or less the same moment in which one sees the muzzle flash. Kawam, 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 in front of us, behind us, next to us. The hiss of the large splinters and the howl of the fuses and projectile bases, mixing into an unmelodic, threatening din. I forgot to write about how, while clearing the foxholes after the attack, Schoinert and I took quite an unusual prisoner. A Russian soldier, but with nearly black skin, almond-shaped eyes, and a long, seemingly Armenian skull shape. Otkuda tai rodom? I asked him, and he replied, Turkmen. The chap came from Turkmenistan. When we didn't shoot him, which he clearly expected us to do, he seemed to say a prayer in his language, but we didn't understand him and shoved him towards the other prisoners. Then he suddenly bent down and touched a lump of snow. Admittedly, I wasn't really taking notice of that, but suddenly he raised his hands and then lowered them again to cross them in front of his chest. Only when he then dropped down on his knees and then leaned forward to touch the ground with his brow did I realize that we had captured a Muslim. For as long as I live, I will not forget this scene. The man on his knees on the snow-covered ground, praying in the manner of his people, while around him the battle was still ongoing, taking no notice of the dead around him, the burning houses, hand grenades detonating nearby, and the sharp reports of the guns of our tanks which were still firing in front of the village. He prayed, probably to thank his God for having kept him alive. Looking at the fact that we captured several camels and are facing troops from Mongolia and Turkmenistan, I guess we are not too far away from the real Asia. There is a lovely smell of roast meat wafting through the room. Krosch, the driver of my Kubelwagen, has collected a large chunk of beef at the field kitchens and is currently preparing it for us. I hope he is quick enough. There is a chance that we might have to leave in less than 2 hours. My wireless operator, Steinbusch, is having a discussion with Peter Schultz. The 2 big mouths match each other well. Steinbusch, the electrical expert, and Schultz, a living pioneer, fuse and master of explosives. Both are trying hard to make sure that the other understands they know more about their respective fields than our good Lord himself. I am tired, and in an hour they will bore me to tears with yet another briefing. Good night. The whole company is assembled on the road to Kotelnikovo, with the lead vehicles at the crossroads. The night is lively with activity. Column upon column is hastening past our waiting men, who are supposed to fall in line with the second wave. Nearby is a Romanian staff HQ, and now and then, when illuminated by a badly screened-off vehicle, we can see the ghostly shapes of the Romanian sentries with their tall black fur caps. For fractions of a second, the whitewashed walls of the Kalmyk houses flash up in the headlights of the passing vehicles, and now and then one can see the divisional insignia on the back of the vehicle ahead, which happens when a driver, half asleep, gets too close to the vehicle in front. A loud curse. A German sentry shouts, "Lights out! Black out! Pull over to the right!" An army goes to battle. We roll across the road which leads to Stalingrad, alongside which we are going to attack. Stalingrad! What a name! Stalingrad on the Volga. This is what it's all about. More than 200,000 comrades are trapped there, and they are about to see that we have not forgotten them. Stalingrad. Since Adolf Hitler underlined that name in his speech, we have not forgotten it. And now, at this hour, during our march into the assembly area, the name becomes a beacon. The comrades at the Volga rely on us. And it will be our men who, during this morning on which the first rays of the rising sun gently touch the endless steppe ahead of us, will launch the blow to bail them out, free them from the Russian grasp. In the previous winter, when we were deployed as infantry, we learned ourselves what it means to be cut off. As we roll into the open steppe, it is 4 a.m. In 1 hour, the attack will begin. I see how some of the commanders, standing in the turret, are looking towards the sky. I follow their gaze and see a rain of falling stars, briefly lighting up and then going out. Some of these heralds of eternity are drawing a fiery tale. I start counting them, and with every one, I wish that I will always have the power and strength to carry on until I am back home, with my first child, which my wife is pregnant with, and which will be waiting for me in the Heimat. These falling stars, up there in the vast black sky, show us once again how small and insignificant we are. In fact, each of us is comparable to such a little falling star coming out of the endless depths of space, briefly flashing up in a bright light only to disappear into endless darkness. However, some of us, only some of us, draw a long tail of fire behind them. The fire can be fueled by their deeds in life, by their merit and its recognition, and in death, by the sorrow and grief of their friends, their comrades, and the people they loved. But even this fire, as bright and hot as it may burn, will go out and disappear into nothingness. Maybe every falling star is the soul of a comrade who went before us, one who is now looking over us, or maybe they are the thoughts of our children and loved ones who remember us out here in this strange and foreign place, fighting against hordes of foes with Mongolian faces, speaking languages we don't understand. The thoughts of the women who hold us in loving memory and who will remember us when we fall in the fulfillment of our duty. This thought is strangely comforting as we roll into the blackness of the vast steppe ahead of us. The tank is swaying on its suspension and is softly rocking me back and forth, just like my thoughts are flicking back and forth. I have to pull myself out of it. Does it make any sense to always try to evade and dodge one's inevitable fate? How often have I looked into the face of death right next to me? I am happy for all those comrades who have been proper men to the final minute of their lives. They have shown no doubt, no hesitation. We need to be like them. A coward will say, "Pa, so what did he get from being brave? He is dead now and can take his courageous deeds with him to the grave." I, however, tell them this. One day your turn will come, and you will have nothing to show for yourself, no glory, no courage, nothing your comrades and brothers in arms will remember you by. In addition, I have the responsibility for my men. None of them asked to be led by me, so I won't rest on my laurels at their expense. I will lead by example. I won't let them charge into certain death, and I will do my utmost not to add to the ranks of the legions of the dead. I will protect them as best as I can. And then, when the dictates of the moment need to be obeyed, then they will follow me to hell and back, no matter what the odds will be. Ever closer to death than the others, we knights in steely armour. I have let my mind drift, and because of that, we briefly lose our way, but that doesn't matter. We'll reach the assembly area well in time. We fuel up using the fuel canisters that each of our tanks is carrying and chuck the empty containers to the side of the worn-out road. It is murderously cold, and an evil wind is howling over the steppe. The frost of the previous days has refrozen the ground, which is now covered with a thin layer of glistening ice. That will be really great. We haven't mounted our ice cleats, and the tracks have worn pretty smooth during all the exercises on the rocky ground of Brittany. They are lacking the grip required to manoeuvre properly on ground like this. Major Low's 1 Abteilung is going first, our 2. Abteilung under Major Bake is going second. The order is Regimental Staff, 7th Company, Staff 2. Abteilung, 8th, 6th and 5th Company. I guess my lot was forming the rear as we already had 2 attacks under our belt. Behind us, the observation vehicle of the light battery, then the 3.7 centimetres flak of the Lair Regiment, 10th Battery, then the regimental engineer Cartgun with all the maintenance and repair services and the ambulances. Behind that, the entire SPW battalion under Hauptmann Kuppers, 2/SR 114, the 6th and 9th Battery of Artillery Regiment 76, 1 battery 8.8 centimetres flak with 3 guns, the 8th Battery of the Flak Lair Regiment with 2 centimetres guns, and behind them the Command Kubel. Then followed the next group, commanded by none other than the Führer's secret weapon, Lieutenant Walzer, can't be seen at the front, himself. He had the field kitchens, the lorries of the maintenance platoon, more Kubels and the dispatch riders. The third group remained in Kotelnikovo, led by my comrade, Oberleutnant August Niemann, and consisted of support vehicles of 2 Abteilung with the air defence platoon Pissug, fuel transports, supply column, paymaster's officer under Feldwebel Rochter, a KFZ-17, and the alternate crew, which hadn't been seen in our company since France, then the shoemaker and tailor, and the whole baggage train. Also at the rear was the young Lindenau, the son of the general from Hamburg. He is so young that in France he was still eligible for an additional underage allowance, and would have loved to be with us at the front. I can understand that, but we need reserves at the rear in case one of us is taken out. We followed behind Lowe, who had raced ahead and was already crawling uphill 110.6 at Kurmajaksi. Our Abteilung had fanned out into a broad wedge, with the 5th Company at the rear to the right for flank protection. In my company, Oberleutnant Peter Schultz led the 1st platoon, Feldwebel Matusik the 2nd platoon, and the always careful Stabsfeldwebel Opetz the 3rd platoon. Crossing 110.6 and a shallow Balka, we drove towards 129.0, our first objective. We were to attack some foxholes defended by Russian infantry, but on the wide hill platform they were impossible to detect. What I could see, however, was that even though our first tanks had managed to cross the Balka, several tanks were still trying, again and again, to climb up the slippery frozen slope. Damn! Are they drunk that they allow their tanks to slip sideways down the slope? They are lucky that none of their rollers have been bent or ripped off yet. To the devil with them! Haven't they learned to drive? As I got closer, I could see the whole mess myself. The opposite bank was heavily frozen, and the first tanks driving up it had compacted and polished the surface further. Now, those following behind can't cross the glassy surface anymore, and either slide away backwards or to the side. There are even a couple of cases where some clod of a driver, and there are always some of those, leaves too little distance to the sliding tank in front. I can see at least 2 collisions caused in that manner. Soon there are a whole lot of tanks clumped together in front of the slope. I let my men wait until most of them have managed to climb up, and then pick a spot, less steep, a bit further away. We then show the others how to do it. Experience is everything. Climb down one slope as slowly as possible in a low gear, and then, with full throttle, up the opposite bank in the same gear, and never ever stop in between. The Balkas here in the steppes of southern Russia form the same kind of tank obstacle which in the north and central sector was formed by those dense primeval forests. But a good tanker will always find a path. It just takes patience and experience. Now that we have crossed that Balka, we rush after the rest of our Abteilung. It is a breathtaking scene. How our tanks thunder across the steppe, how they race forward as if on an attack exercise, and the whole experience grips me much more than any theatre play ever did. This here is real. This is our reality, a reality of steel and blood. The din of hundreds of engines fills the air, a sound drowning out the thundering hooves of the knights of old, louder than any battle in the ancient past. An armada of steel, What do we care for the Russians cowering in their foxholes up on the hill? We have long bypassed them. Our grenadiers, following behind on their armoured half-tracks, have already started to liquidate these pickets of the Red Army. We must go on. We are rolling to the Volga. We are rolling to Stalingrad. We are rushing through the icy wind howling over the steppe towards the railway line. To Gremyachi. Our one Abteilung didn't even stop when it shot the Russian battery, the signalman's house, and the Russian baggage trains to pieces. From the other side, Romanian infantry attacks in wide lines. We have seen that picture often, but it has always been Russian infantry attacking in this manner. Wave after wave of infantry, rifles at the ready. We are passing fleeing Russian infantry and gunning them down with our machine guns. Anyone who is not coming towards us with hands raised is being mown down. But why waste ammunition on these few men? Better to let them run. They will either starve or freeze in the steppe or surrender themselves at a later time. 2 tanks of the 6th Company have run over mines. I can see how the crews bail out, the wounded are recovered, and the minefield is surveyed. We have lost 2 heavy tanks, at least for this attack. The Romanians have now reached the Russian positions, so our wounded are not in any danger of being attacked from the flank. The ambulances are following behind us. We must go on. Via the radio, I receive the order to count the spoils and the prisoners. I tell my radio operator to reply that we are not doing that. Lieutenant Karlfeldts is sorting this out. He is just climbing back into his 2 centimeters tank and is waving over to me. Our medics are starting to work. More and more Romanians arrive who are herding the Russian prisoners together. We attack towards point 147.0, about 3 kilometers west of Verkhna-Kumsky, when the light platoon reports enemy armour, T-34S, near Sogotskot. We all mount up and, behind our leader, Dr. Bake, west of the road to Salvisky, and then turning east in a broad wedge formation towards Sogotskot. With the 5th and 6th Company in the lead, we traverse a hill, from the top of which we suddenly have an unexpected encounter. At a distance of about 1,100 metres, we can see a large assembly of armour, about 40 tanks in total. They are painted white, like ours, and through the binoculars I can clearly see that there are numbers painted onto the turrets. My commanders radio in. Are these ours? Maybe panzers of the 23rd Panzer Division? Surely they are not Russians. Schultz and Matusek radio in. There are no cupolas on the turrets. The guns look a little bit too short. I'm still not sure, but I do order everyone to pick a target and to make ready to fire on my command. The lead vehicles of our Abteilung are now about 700 metres away. If these were Russians, they would have long since opened fire on us. Or are they as uncertain about our identity as we are about theirs? The voice in my mind still tells me that these vehicles somehow look German. And then it all unfolded within minutes. Matusek's voice grates through my headphones. Some of them are turning their turrets. And another voice. Achtung! 2 of them are heading towards us. Then a loud shout across the wavelength of the Abteilung. Russians! Fire! In confirmation of this, there are 2 muzzle flashes ahead as the 2 Russian tanks closest to us open fire. A shell is howling over our turret, and I duck in and button up. They are only about 400 metres away now, but firing on the move, they couldn't even hit a barn door. And then the covering tanks of our companies open fire. The effect is spectacular. The 2 Russian T-34S are torn apart in violent explosions after a multitude of impacts. At ranges under 600 metres, our long 5 centimetres guns are lethal even for a T-34, and with our higher rate of fire and our far superior training, the whole matter was over as quickly as it had begun. Half a dozen T-34AS had turned around early trying to escape, but these were quickly finished off by the 7.5 centimetres tanks of the heavy company, whose guns could crack them like a nut at ranges up to 1,200 metres. Standing in my turret about 20 minutes later, I can see black smoke rising up from the wrecks of 36 Russian tanks. At about 3 p.m, we headed back to Verkhna-Kumsky, where in the meantime another large group of Russian tanks, including several 52-ton giants, had attacked. They too had been repelled, and 8 had been destroyed. Our own losses have been low. 2 tanks lost and 9 damaged, most of which will be operational again in a few days. It is now 9 p.m., and I am sitting in the turret of my tank. I don't know what else to write. Outside, the world seems to be on fire. Wherever one looks, the horizon is illuminated by the orange glow of countless fires. In the distance, the faint rumble of artillery fire, while here, very close and at irregular intervals, there is the rattle of machine gun fire when one of our pickets sends a stream of tracer fire into the night. What they are firing at, I don't know. Probably the same apparitions which make dogs bark in the night, or just to calm their own nerves and to reassure themselves with a display of their own power. I need to sleep now. Gute Nacht. I am sitting in the orderly room of the schoolhouse in Czerniszków. Outside, temperatures have dropped to -25 degrees to -30 degrees, and there is an icy wind howling from the east. Everything outside is covered in a layer of ice which is hard as crystal, but here in the house we are kept warm by 2 large iron stoves. One needs to avoid sitting too close to the thin wooden walls and the windows, however, as they are still as cold as ice. It has been nearly 2 weeks since I last opened my diary, and now that I sit here, I don't know what to write. Finding the words to describe what I have experienced during that time, is that even possible? I don't know, but I will try, even if it's just to give myself some clarity and to unburden my mind. My head hurts, and I'm finding it hard to keep my eyes open. Yet I can't find any sleep, and if I do, the dreams come and I find no rest. Even the last time I had a full night's sleep was on the 11th of December. The tank battle of Verkhney-Kumsky, the thrust towards Stalingrad, everything is over. No day on which there wasn't any fighting light at first, so light that there was the faint hope that the Russians had not even realized that we were thrusting deep into their territory. An advance of nearly 40 kilometers in the first 24 hours. Then the inferno on point 146.9, with our 5th Company attached in support of Grupa Kupa, the night march on Vasilyevskaya, and days of fighting in the bridgehead, low on fuel and nearly out of ammunition. Vasilyevskaya, another name which has forever etched itself into my memory. Relentless Russian attacks, often at regimental strength and supported by armour, had to be repelled. No water, little food, the entire village in flames, our own casualties rising by the hour. Attack and counterattack, again and again. Only our Luftwaffe brought respite when our Ju-88S and Ju-87S dropped their bombs on the Reds. Among those lost is Matusik, my dear old comrade and brother-in-arms. He was severely wounded when the shell of a T-34 penetrated the turret of his tank, and the splinters badly injured him in the face, neck and shoulder. I saw how he bailed out of his stricken tank, but I could not aid him, as I was myself engaged at the time. That was near point 146.9, and we were attacked by 15 or more T-34S, who had opened up on us at long range, and even though they were firing on the move, one lucky shell found Matusik's tank. He lost one of his eyes. I don't know if he is still alive. The regiment now has only 22 operational tanks left. I am told that in total we have destroyed over 200 enemy tanks. But still, they kept on coming. On the 25th of December, it was all over. We are hopelessly outnumbered and in many respects technically inferior. Superior leadership, morale and training alone are not sufficient without ammunition, fuel, food, water and spare parts. The Russians are wearing us down, the infantry here is already broken, and the sole appearance of a Russian armoured car is enough to cause entire picket lines of tired, exhausted Lancers to fall back. It is, however, not over yet. Tank alarm. I'm in the war hospital in Taganrog and have a shell splinter lodged in my right shin. I am lying here together with lots of wounded officers, several severe cases among them. I am feeling outrageously well. I just can't use my leg. I am lying in a white bed, I am washed, shaved, and soon I'll be getting a good breakfast. Nina, the pretty Russian girl, is just washing the severe cases, and soon the doctor will be making his rounds. As such, that's it for now. The doctors haven't made their round yet, so I have time to write a little more. The senior physician on duty is going the other way round today, so he'll be seeing me last. This morning they x-rayed me again, and the nurse remarked that there seemed to be no metal splinters in the leg anymore, just bone splinters. I wonder what the doctor will tell me about that today. If that is true, Then the metal splinter I found in my boot, and the one I pulled out of the hole in my leg, along with the shreds of my underpants, must have been the only metal bits to get too close to my person in the iron-filled air. Maybe my wound isn't as bad after all, and I will be released sooner than I thought. Yesterday I was given a small plywood board which, resting on my left knee, forms a sturdy base to write on. The sun is shining brightly through the large windows, and outside one can see the frozen Sea of Azov glistening in the distance. It is very quiet here. Only now and then the moans and cries of some of the badly wounded comrades break the silence. Some of them have terrible wounds. I am lucky that my 2 centimeters sized hole in the leg isn't giving me any serious trouble. We are getting food now. Nina, the Russian girl who had once been a student at the technical center here in Taganrog, is serving us. She is a nimble and agile girl, while Fyodor, the general dog's body, is the complete opposite. He is just slowly walking past my bed, in one hand a glass full of urine, and in the other a glass of warm tea for another wounded comrade. Fyodor is a professional, and as such, he can carry 2 glasses at the same time, and there is a good chance that he will not confuse the 2. Sadly, the 40-year-old illiterate and former collective farmer cares very little about hygiene. He is immune to even the nastiest dirt and grime, and as such he is quite happy not to clean anything. It won't hurt him, but it might well hurt us. Nurse Antonia has just come in. I christened her Nurse Greta before I knew her actual name, because she looks and sounds just like Greta Weiser. I have noticed that the average nurse doesn't know a lot about medicine, but she has the key to the drug cabinet and access to the apple juice for the severely wounded. She can also tell the pills apart. She is from Saxony, by the way. The bed on my left is occupied by an infantryman from Pomerania, Lieutenant Krakow, 23 years old, a battalion adjutant, and more recently a company leader. He has a penetrating gunshot wound in each thigh. He seems to be a good soldier. His pain isn't too bad either. He is lying on his side and is reading a book. It must be quite an amusing one, as he is regularly laughing out loud. He regularly does so even when a badly wounded comrade is moaning in pain. This is painful for me to bear, but I can't blame him for it. It is not his fault, and only I, in the bed next to him, can hear him laughing. On my right side lies the 21-year-old Lieutenant Schmidt, one of the worst cases on this ward. He has been flown out of the Stalingrad cauldron on a He-111. His right shoulder, right arm, and parts of his right side were completely squashed when a tank ran over him. His arm is gone now, and his pain must be terrible. At the beginning he drank like a horse and soaked himself with juice, tea and coffee. He had lost a large amount of blood, and the body needs lots of liquid to regenerate the blood. He is getting large amounts of painkillers, and as such he has no appetite at all. Now he lies here pale, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. With his current profile he looks like a Jew. I have to get him the newspapers from the cupboard so he can read them to distract himself. The doctor has told us that I and the comrade on my left are on a list of those who will be transported back to the Heimat. The meals were again very good today. Yesterday morning my leg was encased in a plaster cast. At the spot where the wound is, a piece has been cut out so the pus can flow out. To make sure that I don't move my injured leg at all, they have plastered a wooden board horizontally into the bottom of the cast. Now I can't move at all anymore. A dirty trick of the meanest kind. It makes me want to puke. In addition, they have stretched the leg to ensure that it is not healing in the wrong position. And because of that, my knee and ankle have started hurting so badly that I find it hard to sleep at night. I have developed a fever. The wound is inflamed and is trying to discharge all the foreign matter inside it. It hurts like hell. It is nearly midday now. Nina and Fyodor have gone to the kitchen to fetch lunch. Food is always good, and there is plenty of it. In the morning we get bean coffee and jam sandwiches, as much of both as we want. For lunch there is always a good stew. As there are no potatoes, they cook it with rice or noodles. There is plenty of meat too. There is usually soup for dinner and pudding for dessert. In addition, we get sandwiches, thick with butter, sausage or cheese. Again, we can have as many of those as we like, and I am sure that I have already gained some weight since I arrived here. Soon a proper hospital train is to transport us into the general government, so we'll be out of the danger zone. Here in the hospital we have comrades from Stalingrad and the Caucasus. It seems that all the hospitals on the opposite side of the Sea of Azov up to the Caucasus are being evacuated. And it seems that supply depots and army offices towards the Caucasus up to beyond Rostov are also being withdrawn. I guess a Russian attack towards Rostov is expected, and that has the potential to cut off everything between the city and the Caucasus. On the 2nd of January, there was a report that we have taken 1 million prisoners in the Great Bend of the Don, and that we have destroyed such and such a number of enemy tanks. I don't believe any of that, as currently it is our forces that have been surrounded there. There are several comrades here who have been evacuated from there, and they have told me what is going on. Surely that report of the 2nd of January is one of those collective results, all our successes of the previous year combined. I don't want to agitate anyone, no matter how much hot air Joseph Goebbels blows into these reports. But nowadays, even the Wehrmachtsbericht isn't reliable anymore. Or maybe we have to put more effort in to make it all more interesting again. We, or a different high command, one which deploys us in a more systematic manner than before. What else was our thrust on Stalingrad but a great failure? Why haven't they ordered SS Reich, Brigade Hermann Göring, and 7 Panzer Division to attack together? Now they are following up and will be deployed piecemeal, just as we were. It makes me want to puke, but I am just a small man, and maybe my horizon isn't wide enough to understand the actual gigantic and enormous reasoning behind this total lack of plan. I need to change the subject. Today we have eaten very well again, and I have swallowed 3 pills against the pain, and now find it somewhat easier to lie here. I will continue doing that in the future, should the leg give me jip again. Otherwise, I am fine looking forward to the hospital train. A minute ago I went down to the operating room where they renewed my plaster. The wound hurts like hell since they have put that on. Last night I tried to help myself by taking more painkillers and sleeping pills, with success. But now I am feeling so sick that I could vomit. Somehow I have managed to get through that infernal night and the dreams. I don't know if I will ever be able to see snow as just that, or as something romantic like the snowfall at Christmas. Sledging children and snowball fights. The snow I dream about is black and red. There is a picture of that medic on his motorbike who tried to assist some of our wounded at Verkhnekunsky. The tank shell which hit him left no trace of the man. Just a black and dark brown furrow in the soil below the snow cover, and a corona of uniform scraps, bone, flesh, and blood around it. The Russian soldier lying in the snow with mangled legs, his face contorted into a hate-filled, inhuman mask, firing round after round at my tank with his revolver. I didn't fire back. Standing in the open turret hatch, I could only stare at him until he had spent all his rounds. Cursing, he then threw his revolver at us. It fell short. We left him there to die. I still dream of that terrible night in Timkowo on the 31st of December 1941, the thump and crack of the mortar rounds, the tack-tack-tack-tack of the machine guns, the coarse howling and shouting of thousands of attacking Russians. Hurrah! Hurrah! And then I see them falling again and again, and their bodies are swallowed up by that terrible snow. Poor Laufenberg, dear old Geyer, Esser, Schmid. My snow is red and black, but enough of that. The wound in my leg is seeping and is badly inflamed. I wonder how long it will go on like that. There are still scraps of my underpants and other bits of fabric in the wound, and only when they have all oozed out is the whole thing going to heal. Yesterday my old comrade and brother-in-arms, Oberleutnant Schaefer of the Armoured Half-Track Battalion, was brought here. He was shot in the stomach with damage to the sigmoid colon. Soon the whole division will end up here. He said that there are hardly any vehicles left in his company either. He lies on the opposite side of the room and only spotted me in the morning. With him came a lieutenant of the Sturmgeschützabteilung, who told us that Bake's Abteilung had destroyed 37 Russian tanks in a single engagement. That is quite a feat, and I am very pleased about it. One by one, so he told us, repaired tanks were coming back from the workshops so that we could soon resume waging war. But I need to stop here. I'm really not feeling very well. More later. There was a heavy storm last night. and the wind kept howling through the patched-up windows. It was freezing cold in the room, and Fyodor, or Polchan, as we call him, must have been freezing while he was sitting in his armchair on the night watch. I put on my polo neck jumper, which kept me warm quite nicely. It is a disgrace that our blankets and the bedding are full of lice, and those who aren't tortured by these little pests are being bitten by bedbugs. I just hope that the bites don't cause us to fall sick with something. I have got more than enough to do with what I already have. While I was down in the operating room, I saw some severe cases waiting for surgery or to have their dressings changed. Horrible wounds and terrible suffering. I wish I could just keep it all away from me. I am sick of it all, so very sick. And even Joseph Goebbels and his lies can't change that anymore. Another new arrival in the night. A comrade who fought on the Terek and told us about the withdrawal there on the front. I must not indulge in guessing and hoping. Yesterday we had a brief chat about the situation here in the East, but I have steered the conversation to a different, less dangerous subject. I only want to know what this war still holds in store for us. I am not relying on fortune tellers, but on my own common sense and on what I can see with my own eyes. And I have seen a lot of things, and I have thought about a lot of things, and it is not nice if one has to tell oneself again and again, stop thinking about it, all will be good in the end. Even though I have swallowed a lot of pills, the pain in the leg, and in the knee in particular, is still very bad. I am quite willing to bear it all if only I can still use my leg later. The lieutenant with his bloody leg stump, who lies right next to the wall on the opposite side, is suffering much more than I am. And the chap next to him, who has lost an eye and has had his foot operated on for the 4th time now, is not much better off. The sight of them teaches me modesty and to stop moaning about my little problems. One of the medics has just turned up. We told him to get the war administrator up here to take a look at the hygiene situation in the room. Who knows if he'll turn up? Now everyone is talking about whether we will be able to continue if the war drags on much longer, and what we'll do if it suddenly comes to an end. No one seems to dare to think that thought through to the end. Nurse Thermostatia has made an appearance. Lilo, the Russian girl with the admirably well-proportioned body, is taking our temperature. On her attractive body she is wearing a face which decent people would hide in their trouser pockets, and her round skull is disfigured further by her short man's haircut. Something like that you can only see in Russia. She is entering our temperature in a zigzag line on a board above our beds. These numbers will decide who will be allowed to return home and who will have to stay here. And of course, we all hope that we'll be fit enough to be transported to Germany. If only we could return to Germany. How wonderful the thought of not being surrounded by these ugly Russian types day after day. The new comrade next to me is a pioneer. He has just shown me a medal which the Romanians have awarded to him. The Romanians award their decorations in different classes, for officers, NCOs, and enlisted men. Comrade Vinker received his on a light blue ribbon. The previous night I slept without pain. I still woke up several times, but not because anything was hurting. I had to swallow 16 pills. They call it a Eubason shock treatment. This is designed to combat inflammation and is quite brutal. I am feeling terribly sick. The wounded Oberarzt who shares our room says that this is not surprising after such a drastic treatment, but it seems to have worked, and I am more than happy about it. Now it is 7 a.m, and I am washed, shaved, have a fresh haircut, and have hunted some lice. I just had my bandages changed. If only I could get out of these halls of pain. Every day I witness scenes that make my blood run cold. This morning they carried me past my neighbour Schmidt, who was getting a new plaster. His wounds, each about the size of a fist and oozing blood and pus, looked absolutely horrible. Next to me on the other operating table, a man with more than a dozen bullet wounds in his body. They have just rolled him into our room. So far he hasn't said a word. Just now Krakow is raging. He is having a claustrophobic attack, triggered by all the Russians and Germans in the room. He tried to run out into the hallway. Now Antonia has given him an injection, and he has calmed down. Next to him is the lieutenant of the Stug Abteilung. In addition to his wounded thigh, his urethra has been cut by a splinter, and he is in terrible pain. Down in the operating room, there was a new Oberstabsarzt, a professor of medicine and consulting physician, who took a look at my leg and told me that I didn't need to worry. In about 8 weeks or so, it would all be healed up, and I would not even have to go to Germany. My nerves were completely frazzled after this news. The leg is now hurting again. Inside the plaster cast, my heel has started to hurt too. I need to ask them if they can't cut a hole into the plaster there. I need to get out of here, away from the stench of urine bottles, pus and feces. 1:45 p.m. Everything is quiet. Most of the comrades who had their bandages changed this morning are now asleep. The whole procedure is incredibly exhausting. I need to do my utmost to get into a German hospital in the Reich. Away from the many wounded and all the Russian auxiliaries otherwise, I will end up getting the same fits as Krakow. When I look at Comrade Schmidt, fear grips me. I am suddenly terribly afraid, and I don't really know of what. Several Ju-52s are flying overhead with their human freight. I must stop thinking. My nerves are more affected by all this than I thought. One more of those shrill and blood-curdling screams of pain from the operating rooms, and I'll have a breakdown. Never mind the things I have seen and done, like on the day where I lifted Wiegand out of his tank, or when I dressed Gobler's wounds and those of the man who drove into the mine barrier with Oris. I can't do anything like that again. After all the things I have seen and heard here, I can't go on. I am finished with it all. My foot is hurting and there is a pulsating pain inside the wound. I will have to take some more pills. Willie, the Kazakh Russian, is just taking another full pan outside. If only the hospital train would take me to Germany soon, so I don't have to look at that waste carrier anymore. How lovely it would be to do some garden work during my sick leave in Germany. Is that going to happen? Will it come true that the baby's wicker basket will stand in our own garden in the warm sunlight of a spring day? With Ruth and me standing next to it, hand in hand, it would be so moving.